We're in the middle of one of the worst housing affordability crises that we've ever seen in history, and it's even worse than 2008. Many economists are concerned that we are staring down the barrel of a full-blown economic disaster, and that it's not a question of if or when that recession inevitably comes around the corner. It's just a question of whether it's a soft or a hard crash landing. But there are a lot of reasons to suggest that that type of landing, whether it's a soft or a hard landing, that economic contraction is actually a good thing for the housing affordability crisis. That's right. You heard me exactly right. And I had to, when I read all of this information, I did a double take and had to go right back through it. But that's right. Why the recession might be good for housing affordability. So we'll break that down in this video. And then we'll also explain the differences between right now, what we're seeing, and what we went through in 2008. So two factors are contributing to this. And then there's like one like final result that is just like the final nail in the coffin. So the two factors, one is home prices and two is mortgage rates, right? And this all started in 2019. COVID happens, mortgage rates hit rock bottom below 3%. And at the same time, there's a housing shortage, which is also putting upward pressure on home prices. Mortgage rates bottom out. And a lot of people just want out of their homes, right? They feel trapped at home because we're there all day, every day, and they want to upsize and get a bigger home where they can work and live under the same roof. Well, over that time, buying power increased substantially. The problem is that where we remain right now is home prices in Kansas City are still within 1% of their all-time highs. Still within 1%, despite all of the turmoil that we're seeing on the West Coast with home prices being slashed nearly 10, 15%, just 1% within the peak. And not just that, but there's still so much pent-up demand for homes in Kansas City that over the last year, when mortgage rates really shot up because the federal government realized, whoa, we've got a huge problem on our hands. Inflation is out of control. So mortgage rates shoot up, and now that buying power decreases by over half, and hence the housing affordability problem. So here's a chart from fortune.com, and you can see in 2008, we were hovering just under 75, and as of today, we're hovering just under 70. We're in a worse position today than 2008. But even more startling is that huge drop that started in 2021. Well, what happened? We had to increase interest rates. So here's a graph that shows the inverse correlation with how quickly rates shot up. And then I'm going to show you that graph again. Here it is, where housing affordability decreased substantially, all at the blink of an eye. Now, Fortune.com also goes on to explain the three things that are causing the affordability problem from the get-go. So here's a graph that'll kind of quantify this and put it in visual terms. So number one is income. Inflation's super high. We have not seen wages grow commensurate with inflation. So i.e. the buying power, not just when we're talking about real estate, but the buying power of your money from your take-home pay is most likely net decreased, even if you've seen huge increases upwards of 5% year over year in your salary. But that's only a small portion, they say. In fact, a bigger portion is just the home prices, right? We've got this huge supply crunch, and even now nobody wants to sell because of number three, which is mortgage rates. And as you can see, mortgage rates are making up the bulk of this affordability component, where buying power is less than half of what it was just 1 year ago. But there's some light at the end of the tunnel, because with all of these banks collapsing and the banking crisis going on, a lot of investors are looking for safe places where they can put their money, right? Where it's protected, that's not losing its value due to sky-high inflation. And one of those is mortgage-backed securities, which is why, as I speak, we are currently in the third consecutive week of mortgage rates declining, which is a good thing, because mortgage rates, as you just saw, make up a huge component of that housing affordability problem. And it doesn't look like supply is getting any better, because when mortgage rates go super high, everybody who is thinking of moving into a different home, well, now they're staring at their monthly payment, that 3% interest rate versus that 6.5% interest rate. And it's a no-brainer at that point. So here's where mortgage rates are today. You can see that they're hovering around 6.445% for the standard 30-year mortgage. This is down just to 0.025% from last week, where they were at 6.475. And that might seem really minuscule, like it doesn't matter, but keep in mind this small difference compounds over 30 years. And that money you could otherwise be investing in other places that could make you more money over that time. So even small differences matter in orders of magnitude. Now, while mortgage mortgage rates are on the decline, that's not enough to get us over the ledge of this housing affordability problem. But a recession just might be the thing that could do it. In fact, in most recessions, we actually see mortgage rates decrease. So here's a chart that documents the last several recessions and exactly what happens with mortgage rates. And this is just mind-boggling. So whether we're headed for a hard landing or a soft landing, we know the government's playbook, which is to start pumping money into the economy. Fingers crossed we keep that to a minimum, but it looks unlikely. We also know that they'll reduce interest rates to kind of kickstart economic growth again, so the economy can keep pumping along and there's not a full-blown crisis. In fact, due to the nationwide housing shortage and the huge shortage here in Kansas City, we might even see some twisted weekend at Bernie's situation where the lack of supply is what props up the entire housing market. This article from Realtor.com summarizes exactly that. It says, if prices and rates come down a little bit more, that could be all the incentive many homebuyers need to wade back into the market. Now, isn't that wild? A recession, which normally sounds the alarm bells and makes us worry about our jobs and everything else, it might just be the thing that keeps the housing market humming along. But again, there are so many obstacles at play that if you're in that position where you're thinking of buying or selling a home this year, or maybe both, and if you'd like to talk to somebody about this and whether that makes sense for you, I'm all ears. I would love to help. All my contact info's below. Go ahead and reach out, whatever's easiest for you. We can sit down, have that conversation, and make sure you've got a really good idea of the best path forward for you, regardless of what's happening in the broader economy. Now, all of this begs the question of how we stack up today versus what happened in 2008. And a lot of the time when we have catastrophic historical events, there's often a bias at play that kind of anchors our vision and the filter through which we see everything right now through what we experienced previously. But there are three things that are happening right now that are substantially different that lead a lot of experts to believe that we're not headed back for what happened in 2008. Number one, this is possibly the biggest one, and we've touched on this already, which is a huge gap between supply and demand here in Kansas City's housing market. In fact, just a couple weeks ago in my previous market update, which I'll link right here, we went through several different cities around the metro, and even despite buying power decreasing by over half in the last year, there are still a lot of properties that are going under contract with multiple offers over asking price, which is just mind-boggling. But it goes to show the amount of pent-up demand there is compared to the lack of supply. And that's the opposite of what we saw during 2008 in the Great Recession. There were a ton of dirt cheap properties that were dumped on the market all at once. And this article from Realtor.com echoes that point. It says, when the last housing bubble burst, there were far more homes for sale than buyers to snap them up. The reverse is true this time, exacerbated by the national housing shortage. And in fact, here's a graph that'll show the difference between inventory across the country in 2008 versus inventory right now. Now, number two is predatory lending and subprime mortgages. This was a huge driver of what we saw in the Great Recession, as a lot of the time, lenders would offer these introductory promotional interest rates where they'd go ahead and sign you up for that mortgage lickety-split, no problem at all. You can have as many as you want, but as soon as that promotional period was over, the monthly payments went through the roof. A lot of people were forced to sell, and this is all happening at a time when home prices are being forced down upwards of 25-30% depending on the city. So not only are they losing all of the equity in their homes, but they're also having to sell at a loss and pay the bank back because the price they sold at was substantially less than the price they bought the property at. But subprime mortgages and predatory lending practices have been regulated through the roof. It's not perfect, but we've made a lot of headway, and it's a lot harder to qualify for a mortgage right now than it was back then. In fact, a lot of homeowners right now are sitting on upwards of 20% above what they put down on their property that they purchased just 2 years ago. And that huge cushion of equity as home prices have increased give them some type of barrier that would require us to see home prices collapse nearly 35, upwards of 40% until they're actually underwater on their mortgage, in which they're forced to sell or they go into foreclosure. In fact, this article from Forbes says that a key difference now compared to 2008 is that many homeowners have had a large boost to home values. They go on to say if they are in foreclosure, they'll leverage the positive equity by refinancing their home and selling for a profit. In other words, they're going to sell before they have to face the choice of catching a falling knife. And just based on how much equity people have in their homes now, it seems unlikely for that to return, barring a catastrophic hit to home prices and equity. Everything's possible. possible. It's just very unlikely. There's one caveat to all of this that's special and unique to Kansas City's housing market. In fact, this article from Forbes says that housing market watchers believe homes in some areas could see sales and price growth, particularly in locations where home prices have remained affordable in relation to median income. Long story short, it's under 30% of your take-home pay, which in Kansas City is still true. In fact, I filmed a whole video that I'll link right here that breaks down the ins and outs of why Kansas City's housing market is actually one of the most affordable despite all of the storm clouds that we're currently seeing right now. So what does this all mean? What's the point of this video? Well, I can tell you it's not to scare you, but I think if you're going to buy or sell a home this year or next year, knowing the implications of what's happening with the broader economy is going to give you the upper hand. And keep in mind, this is a competition. You're competing against other home sellers, you're competing against other home buyers, and having the crucial upper hand that they don't have, spending the extra time to learn about this stuff and know how it impacts the housing market is exactly what's going to put you in a really good position to get a home at a good price or to sell your home at an incredible price, or maybe even both. Now, aside from the data and statistics that I showed you in this video, all of this is basically speculation. And even people who have been studying economics and real estate and financial cycles their whole lives, they can get it wrong. Nobody's got the crystal ball, but what this really comes down to is your specific situation, your finances, and your timeline for buying or selling a home in Kansas City. And if you'd like to have a conversation to get a little bit more clarity as to what the next best path forward is and what all of this means for you specifically, I would love to talk. All of my contact info is below. Whatever's easiest for you, call, text, or email. Long story short, most likely we're headed for some difficult times, but the housing market, it's most likely going to stay strong, propped up by the huge gap between supply and demand. We'll most likely see mortgage rates start to fall, and your buying power when it comes to purchasing a home in Kansas City is most likely going to improve over the next year. But the biggest wild card is really the state of the broader economy and how it impacts your job, inflation, your budget from month to month, and everything else. So I'd love to talk with you if you have any concerns about this. Of course, if you're buying or selling a home and you'd like to leverage this expertise so you have an upper hand in the market, I would love to help you. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe so you see future updates and videos and community spotlights and everything else, and I will see you on the next one.